friends, and welcome to the next episode of the Get Healthy Makeover series. I'm Linda Curry. Today, we are talking about sugar cravings. Very important topic as the food industry has really brought forth a lot of sugar in processed foods and convenience foods that are basically making people addicted to sugar. And it's changing the chemistry in our body for making it very easy to crave more and more sugar. And it's like this horrible roller coaster we're on as we try to struggle with these cravings. I want to share with you a quote by Dr. Mark Hyman. And he says that we blame people for being overweight and sick, but it's not their fault. Our taste buds, hormones, and brain chemistry have been hijacked by the food industry. And sugar is a major villain here. Being addicted to sugar and flour is not an emotional eating disorder. It's a biological disorder driven by hormones and neurotransmitters that fuel sugar and carb cravings, leading to uncontrolled overeating. It's why we are seeing an epidemic of type 2 diabetes and obesity, but also heart disease, hypertension, and many common cancers and Alzheimer's. So, wow, sugar is a huge culprit with many different health issues and something that we should take very seriously to make sure we don't get addicted. So, when we eat sugar and simple carbohydrates, we get an unbalance of bacteria in the gut. So, we get more bad bacteria or yeast, and that kind of crowds out the good bacteria. And so we get into this situation where the yeast needs the sugar to survive. And so it cries out for you to consume more sugar. So I want you to think about this mindset of it's not you craving the sugar, but it's the yeast. And when we understand that, it's much easier to avoid sugar when we know that what's going to happen is we're going to kill off that yeast if we starve it. So I want you to have a different mindset when you think about your sugar cravings. Now let's talk about the microbiome or the gut flora. And when you hear these terms, it really is the environment in your colon. A good gut flora optimizes your immune system. It protects your gut lining for optimal health. When we have a lot of sugar or even stress and things like antibiotic use, as well as a poor immune system, this can cause a poor gut balance. And that's when we get an overgrowth of yeast, sometimes referred to as candida, which is a type of yeast. And when we have a lot of yeast in the gut, it can cause something that's called leaky gut. What this means is the lining in the gut, the permeability weakens and we can get little holes in it. Good bacteria actually protects that gut lining. So when we have a lot of bad bacteria, we can get these little holes, and then food particles can actually go into your bloodstream and into the lymph system. This causes an immune system reaction to attack it because it's not supposed to be outside of the gut. And so the immune system attacks it and it starts to learn that these food particles are bad. And that's where food sensitivities and food allergies can actually develop. So food sensitivities, we talked about in a previous episode, and it's important to identify these food sensitivities so that you can take them out of your diet for a period of time while this gut heals and your immune system can function more properly. In order to manage a good gut flora or this environment, there's 3 steps. One is to starve the yeast, and that really is to stop feeding it the sugar and the simple carbohydrates. The second step is actually to repair and support the gut lining. And so things that we've talked about in the past that are very supportive of this are things like bone broth or ghee. Even things like coconut oil might be very gut healing for that permeability of the gut lining. And the third step is actually nourishing and growing the good bacteria. So we get more of a healthy balance of that good bacteria and the yeasts. The yeast actually drop to a lower level. And how do we do that? That's with taking probiotics, that's with eating cultured or fermented foods, things of that nature. So in your notebook this week, you might want to consider taking steps in each of those areas, starving the yeast, repairing the gut lining, and nourishing that good bacteria. So, how do you combat cravings? I have some tips for you. As you try to maybe starve out this yeast, some tips that might help you make it a little easier. One thing you can do is using apple cider vinegar. And if you buy it with the mother, it'll say with the mother on the label. If it has this live culture in it, that's actually going to add good bacteria to your gut. It's something that you could actually put, a teaspoon in your glass of water, and well, it'll help cut down cravings, or even sprinkle it on steamed vegetables. In the hydration tonic that we talked about, if lemons aren't in season, sometimes I will use apple cider vinegar in its place, and that'll add some good bacteria to your gut. Eat lots of cultured veggies. This is going to, over time, combat cravings of sugar because you're going to be increasing that good bacteria in your gut, and it'll eventually kind of crowd out the bad bacteria. That's what we want. Drink a large glass of water, as cravings are often due to dehydration. And if you follow the hydration protocol in the first episode of this series, that will help with your cravings. Ensure plenty of protein, fat, and some carbohydrates in each meal and snack. That is going to give you a very good balance of protein, fat, and carbs in order to satiate and sustain you. I know that if you are craving a lot of carbohydrates, it probably means you're not eating enough protein and fat in your meals, and that's why you're probably craving snacks throughout the day. I want to give you some snack ideas when you do get that sweet tooth. Now, I don't recommend these if you are going to come up with a goal of eliminating sugar for a few days, or maybe you have a goal of eliminating it for a couple weeks. Keep in mind that our brains and our cells, and for our cells to get hydration, we do need some glucose in our body. So I don't necessarily eliminate sugar 100%. Like I will have low sugar fruits like colorful berries that are so high in antioxidants. I feel like there's more benefit to eating them than not eating them. But once you get past this starving out the yeast and you're feeling better, we do still need a sweet snack once in a while. And so some homemade things that I have come up with are just cutting open a date and filling it with some almond butter and sprinkling some cinnamon on it. It can really satiate you. Dates are actually high in sugar, but they're also very high in fiber. So it's actually very filling and satiating. I like to also make protein balls. So these nut balls, date nut balls, I kind of call them, using dates, or you can actually omit the dates if you don't want any sugar at all, and just using nut butter, cinnamon, some nuts and seeds, and just rolling them up and putting them in the refrigerator and popping one in your mouth when you need a sweet treat. That nut butter is going to give you some healthy fat and protein so that you don't get a sugar spike. You can also make a hot cocoa drink using a sweetener with like stevia leaf or monk fruit drops. I don't necessarily like these artificial sweeteners, even the natural ones like stevia and monk fruit that are coming from plants, because it does signal the brain that it's sweet, and you may continue to crave sweetness if you use too much of these products. But once in a while, it's a really great treat to get something sweet without feeding the yeast in your gut. I also love to make a shake in my blender using cacao powder. Cacao is really just raw cocoa, so it has really high antioxidants in it because it hasn't been heat processed. And I add to that some almond butter or maybe a sunflower butter, and possibly a banana to that and some almond milk. And blend that up, and it is so incredibly tasty. You might have to add a touch of honey or maple if you need a little sweetness, but sometimes the banana will do the trick. And I mentioned before my chocolate avocado pudding that I make, which is super delicious. The avocados are super satiating, and you don't taste the avocado because the chocolate has a very strong taste to it. I use again the raw cacao powder because it's very healthy and high in antioxidants, avocado and almond milk, and then I do add a touch of honey or maple, enough to make it taste good, and maybe a pinch of sea salt. Sometimes I use some cinnamon or some vanilla as well. A lot of these recipes are on my blog if you want to check them out. So for this week, that was a lot of information, but very important information for sugar cravings and getting a handle on the balance of our gut flora or our microbiome, as it's referred to. Getting the yeast levels down and the good bacteria up so we can protect the gut lining, which also is important in protecting the lining in our brain, believe it or not. So we can have a lot of neurological issues if we don't have a good gut lining. So it's very important for many health issues. So this week, what goals and actions can you come up with to better balance your microbiome? I'm going to give you some examples. One might be cutting refined sugar and refined carbs. You might not want to eliminate sugar right off the bat, but you might want to replace it with raw honey or grade B maple syrup, which is going to be a healthier option. Consider using pure monk fruit or stevia, again in moderation. Eat low sugar fruits like berries, so it's satiating. So you get a little bit of sweetness without a lot of sugar. Use cinnamon as maybe on a rice cake with a nut butter. Using cinnamon actually adds a little bit of sweetness without any kind of sugar that's going to cause yeast imbalance. Consider probiotic use as well as cultured foods. This is going to greatly cut down on sugar cravings, and add more fiber and vegetables to your meals because the good bacteria needs food, and that food is called prebiotics. Really, it comes from fiber. And then something I've mentioned in the past is having fat and protein in all of your meals and snacks. I cannot emphasize this enough. It is so important and so effective to cutting carb cravings. And once in a while, we need a sweet treat. Try making it yourself, and perhaps make a batch and keep them in your freezer so that you can pull one out from time to time when you need something sweet, and enjoy every single bite without guilt. With that, I want to thank you so much for joining me this week to talk about sugar and yeast and balance. And I hope you will take this week to make some positive changes to your lifestyle, individualize it for you. Comment below if you need some help or assistance or have questions. I'm here to help.